Narayana namaskrityam naram chaiva narottamam devim saraswatim vyasam tato jayam udiraye. Om namo bhagavate vasudevaya. Om namo bhagavate vasudevaya. Om namo bhagavate vasudevaya. Hare Krishna. Thank you for joining us. We are continuing from our discussion of the third chapter. We're going to conclude the third chapter today. And we had a few verses which we wanted to stress upon from the previous session. And this is the third chapter of the second canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. Significantly, we would want to reflect on verses starting from verse 15 of chapter 3 of the second canto. So those of you who are joining us and also have a copy in front of you, which is what I would highly encourage, I would suggest that you go to the second canto, chapter 3, verse number 15. So in this verse, what is significant is that it starts off by a description of the meeting between Srila Sukadeva Goswami and Parikshit Maharaj. So this chapter, we see two conversations. One, we see a conversation between Srila Sukadeva Goswami and Parikshit Maharaj. And then we also see the conversation between Sutta Goswami and Shaunaka Rishi. Sutta Goswami was one of the participants in the original rendition of the Srimad Bhagavatam. And he then goes on to Naimisharanya and then spreads the message of the Bhagavatam to a larger audience in Naimisharanya. Now, what is fascinating to see is that there was such an eagerness to understand and to follow the truth. There was such eagerness to imbibe the path within themselves that the gathering in Naimisharanya was considered to be very, very large. And it is fascinating to see that these were already accomplished speakers. They were accomplished spiritualists. Some of them were on the liberated platform. Yet the quest for wanting to learn and adapt and the eagerness for Sangha is extraordinarily evident from the fact that they all gathered together and then they were very eager and they presented themselves to hear from Sutta Goswami. Srila Sutta Goswami was in the original assembly, and as a consequence, his words carried the message and the emotion of the original assembly, which is the gathering which took place between Sukadeva Goswami and Parikshit Maharaj. And as a consequence, you could see this eagerness for advancement, and the primary ingredient for advancement is Sangha. When there is an eagerness for Sangha, and this eagerness for Sangha is practically accomplished in terms of wanting to hear and wanting to prioritize Sangha over and above everything else, then one's spiritual life has already begun in very good earnest. Because Sangha is being described here, and the verse 15 is quite significant. We spoke about it in the previous session, but we want to elaborate on a few topics. In verse 15, the translation says, Maharaj Parikshit, the grandson of the Pandavas, was from his very childhood a great devotee of the Lord. Even while playing with dolls, he used to worship Lord Krishna by imitating the worship of the family deity. So family culture, there's this tradition that has been passed on by being a part of a certain family surrounding. This is extraordinarily significant. It is actually quite profound when someone is born into a devotee family. Then they have an opportunity right from the day one of being able to come in touch with the angas of bhakti. They receive prasadam, they hear Naam, and then they come in touch with the dust of the lotus feet of the senior devotees in so many different ways. The culture of Vaishnavism is already imbibed into them in a very powerful but natural way. It is as if they would know this better than they would know what is to be learned outside in the secular world. They would know what they pick up at home, and they would sensitize themselves and protect themselves with what is being picked up at home before heading out. Now, what we do see here is that this particular verse has a lot of other significant aspects too. What is being described in this verse is not so much Parikshit Maharaj's lineage, even though his being born in a devotee family is being emphasized. The fact that as a child he had opportunity to observe deity worship. And then he had the desire to imitate deity worship. And as a consequence, the family tradition is definitely being highlighted. But more so, what is being highlighted is the recognition of the coming in touch with profound aspects of devotional service, but also exhibiting the eagerness to engage in them. That is being described here. So, as a child who is very simple and who is very innocent, if someone were to observe deity worship and then they start worshiping the deities as a natural way, then that is being glorified here because there's something about him which was so natural that he started with deity worship from the word go. He did not have any kind of attraction to other kinds of play, but he was very attracted to deity worship, and he used his dolls or created an informal deity worship atmosphere. What is being described here is that the external practice and the observation of external practice is very important. We spoke about it in the previous session. And the reason we emphasized on that particular aspect is because it is easy to observe and judge. Oftentimes, we can make so many different mistakes in judging others surrounding us in terms of their intentions, because they could speak in a certain way. Sometimes devotees can be very harsh, and sometimes devotees can also be insensitive in many ways. And as a consequence, we tend to harbor feelings which are based on our own experiences, which can't be ignored. I'm not saying that you can push all of these under the carpet and simply focus on the fact that someone is interested in deity worship. But what is to be emphasized here in Srimad Bhagavatam is they are making an external observation. And this external observation is significant. And it is being said in the Srimad Bhagavatam that when you observe eagerness of the angas of bhakti in an individual, we should know that there's something alive about that person. Can everybody put yourself on mute, please? Because I'm hearing some static. I think it's a bounce back static from whoever is attending, but I'm going to try and see if I could put you on mute. But please do take a look at your phones as well. So what does it mean when we see someone practice devotional service at childhood? What does it mean when we see someone practice devotional service externally? What it does mean is that it means that the person is more alive. They're very alive. And what does it mean when we say alive? In America, in the US, there are many states which still execute prisoners. There are death penalty states in America. And the death penalty states in America are, because every state in America has its own constitution, they align themselves with the federal structure, but they have their own constitution and they adhere to it. And there are states that are death penalty states. There are states which have abolished death penalty. Now, what is somewhat crude is that in the death penalty states, and this is true, you could check online the practice, and it is also a part of the more regular dictionary practice. When a prisoner who is condemned is walking towards his execution, then the guards who surround him, they make a very loud announcement as he walks. They say, "You're seeing a dead man walking." You see, they make this statement. They say, "A dead man is walking." It's a condemned prisoner. And a condemned prisoner is walking towards execution. The guards surrounding him, in US prisons, it is present practice. Yeah, it is not ancient practice. It's current day practice in death penalty states. They use this language saying it's a dead man walking. And it is basically that particular dead man walking statement has actually become a metaphor. It has become a euphemism to describe someone who is on the way to destruction but doesn't know it, or in whose case destruction is inevitable but hasn't recognized it. So this dead man walking is a euphemism. It's a metaphor which is used in regular, I would say, language, but its derivation comes from the United States prisons, where a condemned prisoner is walking towards the electric chair or walking towards the lethal injection table, and the guards shout, "A dead man is walking," just to make everybody aware of how serious the crimes are. Yeah. So now what does it mean? Because the rest of the verses in this particular chapter, they are talking about who is dead and who is alive. When someone sees a soul who is in a body, acting out in devotional service, it means the soul is far more awake than the body. The senses of the body and the matter covering the soul have not overwhelmed the primary impulse of the soul to surrender and to serve Krishna. So this is a very profound, noticeable act which has to be respected. So when you see someone who is very alive, in our language, we mean that person is acting out in his original or her original constitution in relationship to Krishna. That is being alive. Being dead is to just be aware of what the senses are giving us. Being dead is to identify with matter. Being dead is to walk towards a certain situation which is inevitable, which is destruction of the body is inevitable. It is the truth. It is the truth. Being born means one is going to also go do the transition. So what we are looking at in the next few verses is very important for us to recognize that when we do recognize someone worshiping the Supreme Lord, it means they're acting according to their constitutional position of being a servant of the Lord. The soul is alive. The soul has taken over. The soul is basically directing the chariot to go in a direction which it feels is very powerful, which is very important. So when a child is worshiping with the dolls, the child is more alive than ever before because the child, the soul within the body, is acting out in the original relationship, the eternal relationship. Satchidananda, that is coming forth in a very profound, profuse manner. So what is being observed is they're trying to make a distinction between what is alive and what is dead. The soul within a body in which the body has overwhelmed the soul, and the soul basically is completely overwhelmed by the impulses received from the environment, because especially now, the impulses from the environment are very intense. They're very intense. They're quite, I would say, profoundly overwhelming when people's senses are being bogged down and bewildered by so many different things that can happen to them. You can have health issues, you can have economic issues, you can have so many other variations of both. And all of that is being presented in such a way that people really feel quite overwhelmed with the circumstances. But if you're so overwhelmed with the circumstances that it affects your devotional service, then we are responding to a dead body, because we are dead men and women walking. It is a fact that is being emphasized here in the Srimad Bhagavatam. It is being emphasized in the chapter 3, which talks about devotional service. Someone who is following the precepts of devotional service, who is acting out in devotional service, and who is engaging their senses in devotional service is a soul which is completely alive. And this is a fact which has to be recognized and has to be accorded great respect. That is the reason why the last week when I spoke about it, I said that devotees can be difficult to deal with. Devotees can be obnoxious. Sometimes devotees can be insensitive. They can speak things which they shouldn't, or they share things which they're not supposed to in the manner in which they're supposed to. But please remember that the soul in that body is alive. That particular soul in that body has recognized and is coming in touch with the angas of bhakti in a profound manner. Now, the real changes in the qualities of the person to align itself with the qualities of a devotee, of being humble, being gentle, being sensitive, etc., it is a matter of time. It is a matter of time. This is not condoning bad behavior. It is for us to recognize the positives and the negatives. If the positives and the negatives are not recognized in a proper way, giving credence to the fact that someone in that particular body, that soul in that body, has recognized the environment, has rejected what is material nature to some extent, has accepted their eternal self, and they're taking time to develop the angas of bhakti, then we ought to spread the message that that person is alive. We want to be careful in dismissing that action totally. Why is this being said here? It is because now they are looking at a child who is playing with dolls and pretending to worship. In other words, wanting to engage in the idea of worship, but does not know the various formalities, but then is giving his heart to the idea of worship. That child is being praised here. His actions are being praised here because that action itself means that what is inside is completely alive and has woken up. That child is not a dead man walking. It is not, because the child is completely alive. It has not been overwhelmed by the material senses. It has not been overwhelmed by the impulses and the environment which is presenting itself in the form of so many complexities. So this particular statement here, Maharaj Parikshit, the grandson of the Pandavas, from his very childhood, a great devotee of the Lord. Even while playing with dolls, he used to worship Lord Krishna by imitating the worship of the family deity. So what to say of someone who is nicely formally trained? Yes, their behavior can be bad, and I'm bringing this up repeatedly because we jump to conclusions about the impossibility of dealing with people in devotional service. And I'm saying, take a step back. Take a step back. They are doing many, many things that are right. They could be doing things that are completely wrong. Give them time, because it's a matter of time when they would turn around and the great potency of devotional service would take over. It would take over, and you would see the results of devotional service being executed. So give time and look for qualities of devotional service, because that soul is alive. That person is alive. They're already on the path of eternality. So imagine this person who has been given an opportunity to walk the long road onto devotional service. They're doing several mistakes, but they will get back on track. It's a matter of time. This is the opinion of our acharyas. This is the opinion of Shastra. That is the reason why I'm emphasizing this particular fact, is that when we do come in circumstances which are difficult to understand, please look for signs that the soul is alive. Please look for signs that the soul, the individual, is exhibiting qualities that are very important in the aspect of devotional service. Because it is very easy for us to get captured by the bad behavior that is being displayed. And we see that quite often. It's unfortunate, it's a fact, but we see it quite often, but it is something for us to recognize. It is very important for us to recognize that it's a problem if we jump to just one conclusion. There never is a circumstance which can be looked at in isolation, especially when it involves devotees. You can never say that someone is going through karma. You can never say that two devotees do not like each other, because there is the Krishna factor in between. So it's far more complex. It is more complex than you can ordinarily understand and then reject and accept. Krishna is involved. How could you say that somehow or the other Krishna wasn't involved in that interaction and trying to improve that interaction with each other? So there is the Krishna factor. So we do not want to really look at circumstances in our communities, in our temples, even within ourselves, in our interactions, and then reach conclusions in isolation that it is either karma or it is the environment. No, it's neither of those in full. Krishna is also involved. As a consequence, we always account for the Krishna factor when we judge things, which is what they're doing in this particular verse. They're looking at a child. The child has been born into a family which has got great lineage. The child is practically the grandnephew of the Lord, but they are not highlighting any of those factors. They are highlighting behavior, and they are highlighting the fact that the child is alive. The child has recognized itself. The child basically has accepted the fact that what's within is a servant of the Lord, and that needs to be projected. The child is acting according to its original impulse of being constitutionally a servant of the Lord. So this is fascinating to see how they're reaching conclusions. Now let's go on to the next verses. Sukadev Goswami, the son of Vyasadeva, was also full in transcendental knowledge and was a great devotee of Lord Krishna, the son of Vasudeva. So there must have been a discussion of Lord Krishna, who is glorified by great philosophers in the company of great devotees. We spoke about it briefly in the previous session as well. It takes realizations to come through. There has to be a good person who is able to receive realizations, but there also has to be an audience which has the capacity and the maturity to receive it from them. So when there is someone who is accomplished in sharing the tenets of Srimad Bhagavatam, the audience also matters, because the audience, the sincerity and the maturity of the audience has to complement or go along with the intentions of the speaker, because the realizations that come through do change. As someone who gives classes quite often, I see those, I'm very sensitive to those changes which occur even when I speak, is that there are certain things which are revealed in certain ways, in the sense that we get used by Krishna and Krishna's servants, the parampara, in certain ways, depending on who is supposed to hear and what they're supposed to hear. So when we approach Srimad Bhagavatam very prayerfully, that is, we do not take it as a book, but we understand that we want to interact with Krishna, then what does happen is that our intentions, the sincerity of our intentions, are rewarded amply, because then the intentions are rewarded by giving us an experience of Srimad Bhagavatam, because it's dynamic, because scripture is dynamic. It is not static. It's alive. It's completely conscious. It is Krishna himself. As a consequence, scripture starts interacting with us. This is a very important fact. When you deal with the Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, scriptures, approach prayerfully, and you'll see a completely different way of looking at things. The intelligence to come in touch with scripture would shift. It will make a shift. So you should pay attention to how you approach a class in Srimad Bhagavatam. You should pay attention to how you approach the scripture Srimad Bhagavatam in terms of what is being presented and how you approach it prayerfully, understanding that you're going to deal with Krishna now. And as a consequence, you come in touch with him with reverence, you come in touch with him with a certain level of dedication. So that's being brought forth here as well, that Srila Sukadeva Goswami was a transcendentalist. He was liberated. He was already liberated. But because he was already liberated and he came in touch with rasa, the relationship of Krishna, that invoked his interest. So Srimad Bhagavatam has Sukadeva Goswami, who is already liberated, who is speaking, whose position was such that he was transcendentally situated, but the transcendentally situated Sukadeva Goswami was himself overwhelmed with the narration of Srimad Bhagavatam and Katha of Krishna. When such a great accomplished person is speaking, and the audience is Parikshit Maharaj, who showed great signs of being alive and being in touch with his eternal self right as a child, then you have a great exchange, because now you have a mature speaker and you have a mature audience. As a consequence, there are realizations that flow through with more profundity. Both by rising and by setting, the sun decreases the duration of life of everyone, except one who utilizes the time by discussing topics of the all-good personality of Godhead. Now, this is again an emphasis on being alive. This is again an emphasis and a reminder that if you do not use your time in the service of the Lord between one sunrise to the next sunrise, sun rising, sun setting, and then sun rising. One sunrise to the next sunrise is a 24-hour period. In the Vedic line, we don't end the day at 12 midnight. Our day begins at sunrise, it ends at the next sunrise. It's a 24-hour period. It does not end at midnight. It doesn't. It's basically a Western calculation for various reasons, but it does not end at midnight. Our day begins at 6 a.m., it ends at 6 a.m. in the morning. That is one full day. So the next day begins at the next sunrise. So here, by rising and by setting, the sun decreases the duration of life of everyone. This is again an emphasis on the concept that you are not alive unless your soul has awoken to the prospect of continuing its eternal journey. It is not there. So as a consequence, they are saying that both by rising and by setting, the sun decreases the duration of life of everyone. So we are, in effect, dead men and women walking. But when we come in touch with eternality in the form of Sangha, because the Sangha or the devotees, they enthuse us. When we come in touch with eternality in the form of Harinam, Krishna is Nam, Nam is Krishna. When we come in touch with eternality in the form of Srimad Bhagavatam, Srimad Bhagavatam is Krishna, Krishna is Srimad Bhagavatam. They are non-different. When we come in touch with eternality in the form of the deity of the Lord, non-different. The deity is Krishna, Krishna is the deity. There's no difference whatsoever between the deity form of the Lord and the Lord himself. And then when we come to Vrindavan, to Mayapur, to Jagannath Puri, to the Dham, these Dhams basically are vibrant and they are continuous, I would say, eternal. The Dham itself is basically a piece of the spiritual sky. It is basically the spiritual sky. Jagannath Puri, Mayapur, and Vrindavan, it is the spiritual sky. It is said that the layer that covers the Dham, the material layer, is very thin. It's very thin. Actually, in the Dham, the material layer is very thin. You are in the spiritual sky when you are in Vrindavan. but the material layer that covers the spiritual sky here is very thin. So those of us whose consciousness is not fully developed would stay on the material layer. Those of us whose consciousness is developed, because the material layer is so thin, they would be able to come in touch with very profound spiritual experiences and spiritual phenomena. So when you come in touch with the Dham, you are coming in touch with Krishna. As a consequence, what is being said here is that the sun is setting and the sun is rising. Everybody who has not come in touch with Krishna in any one of these ways or all of these ways is basically someone who is already on the way to leaving the body, because they are dead men and women. There's nothing alive about them because there is nothing eternal that is being basically connected to them at this point. So it is being said here, both by rising and by setting, the sun decreases the duration of life of everyone except one. So the devotee's life is eternal because they're always in touch with eternal phenomena. Our journey towards an eternal life has already begun. The body has no consequence. The body has no consequence because the body is not able to influence our daily life. It is not able to. And I say this because to the extent to which one has developed the Krishna consciousness, to that extent, the mind has no say in their affairs. The mind has absolutely no say in intervention in the affairs of one whose Krishna consciousness is fully awoken. The mind has no say. We spoke about it in the previous session. During the process of anartha nivritti, we should be able to recognize that the mind is very alive, the body is very alive. The impulses from the senses, the impulses from the body, they become very alive. They torment us. A lot of energy goes in just subduing these impulses. So the 2-hour session of japa, most of the time is spent in just kicking the mind from disturbing us. Oh, I shouldn't be thinking like this. I shouldn't be thinking like that. You know, we constantly try and chastise and bring our mind in control. This is basically the mind and the body having a big say in our eternal journey, which means they are more alive than the soul. The soul is being overwhelmed. This is anartha nivritti, where anarthas are overwhelming the journey of the soul. But once you cross anartha nivritti, then at that point in time, the mind and the body have very little to intervene. They can't intervene. They can't. They do not have the ability to intervene. They have no say whatsoever in taking decisions in the life of the person. They have greater control after anartha nivritti. So in reality, spiritual progress is more freedom. The more we are bound by the lower bounds, the lower modes of nature, the less free we are. The more we advance, greater is the freedom. When we sit for japa, if our mind is tormenting us, if we can't sit still, if we cannot concentrate, if we cannot speak Harinam properly, even after receiving so many instructions, understand that we are basically in a situation where the body and the mind are far more influential than the soul. The opposite is true when the soul becomes powerful and is executing its journey. The opposite is true when you cross the process of anartha nivritti and you become fixed in devotional service. Then you experience a situation where the japa session, and I'm using the japa session because it's a very good barometer for all of us to take account for where we are. The japa session after anartha nivritti is such that there is almost 100% contribution to hearing of Nam. And I'm using the word almost because we're still in the material world. There could still be some level of influence from nature. But it is almost. It is almost. It is almost there. So there's really no influence of the mind and the body. Now here, they are minimizing or waking us up to the fact of the activities in this world. If the body is alive, and the mind, of course, is going to be led by the senses, then our focus is on the environment, the focus is on the journey of life. There's lesser focus on the eternal journey of the soul. So the question that's being asked here by Shaunaka Rishi is, do the trees not live? So the question is, don't you have trees on the road? Aren't they being taken care of? Do not the trees live? Do the trees not live? Do the bellows of the blacksmith not breathe? All around us, do the beasts not eat and discharge semen? In other words, isn't the process of eating, mating, sleeping, and defending, isn't this going on for creatures that have lower faculties, creatures that basically do not have much of a, I would say, existence, like animals and trees and plant life? Aren't they being maintained? Isn't this something which goes on? In other words, they're drawing attention to the fact that when the body is alive, we tend to focus more and more on the eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. That is our whole focus. There's constantly great energy which is being expended in just trying to improvise the eating, sleeping, mating, and defending part. That's the body being alive. The body being alive means it's a dead man or dead woman who is walking, because eventually this body is going to get destroyed. And as a consequence, the message that is being asked of in these verses is that if you really observe nature and around you, you will notice that there are so many things that are happening on their own accord. They seem to be accepting. What is so significant? They seem to be accepting of all the different arrangements that are being made. If you come to Vrindavan today, you don't have anybody walking on the streets, and you have monkeys. Every one of us who has visited Vrindavan, we know how much the monkeys do harass us on the roads, because they're constantly trying to harass the tourists. They take away glasses, they snatch the purses and the japa bags even, and then they demand something in return. But now, because there's nobody around, the monkeys themselves are quite full on, they're quite subdued. But there are people who go around in the auto rickshaws and the rickshaws in the morning, and they carry large quantities of bananas and fruits. They're distributing it to the monkeys. In other words, in Vrindavan, you will notice that these animals who basically used to struggle a lot in certain ways, they are being maintained quite easily by Krishna. They are receiving their food, good quality bananas and apples and so on and so forth are being distributed to the animals here, and they are basically accepting it. They are accepting the arrangement. So it's quite natural. That is what is being spoken of here, that an animal gets maintained. It does not strive as much for eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. So if we were to reflect on it, if you focus so much on eating, sleeping, mating, defending, isn't your life an animal life? That's the question that's being asked of in these verses. Men who are like dogs, hogs, camels, and asses, praise those men who never listen to the transcendental pastimes of Lord Sri Krishna, the deliverer from evils. Basically, someone whose senses are completely alive as such, like an animal. One who has not listened to the messages about the prowess and marvelous acts of the personality of Godhead, and has not sung or chanted loudly the worthy songs about the Lord, is to be considered to possess ear holes like the holes of snakes. What is so special about the ear holes like the holes of snakes? And a tongue like the tongue of a frog. Yeah? Basically, it is just filled with venom. And because it gets filled with venom, when it speaks, it is just nonsense. So whatever we receive into our ears, we speak through our mouth. So they are basically talking about receiving a lot of garbage and then spending a lot of time speaking such garbage. That is being spoken, especially if Krishna's prowess and marvelous acts are not being discussed. Why is it that they are kind of giving us such an extreme presentation? They're giving us an extreme presentation because some of us may question, saying, oh, we have to live in this world. We have things to do. Yes, absolutely. But why is Bhagavatam taking on a very extreme view? Why are they talking about the trees? How could someone live like a tree? How could someone live like an animal, completely dependent on whatever is being given? Why is such an extreme view being presented? They're giving us an extreme view to show very clearly that even in those circumstances which look almost impossible to survive, there is someone taking care of these people, these creatures. They are basically presenting a fact that if we were to 100% focus on the eating, sleeping, mating, defending, we are making this body very alive. Then that practically lends itself to the description that we are simply not aware of the consequences of living in a body such as ours. You're not aware of it. That's the point which is being emphasized. The upper portion of the body, though crowned with a silk turban, is only a heavy burden if not bowed down before the personality of Godhead, who can award mukti. And the hands, though decorated with glittering bangles, are like those of a dead man if not engaged in the service of the personality of Godhead, Hari. The hand which serves, which is such a powerful, powerful beginning. When you see someone come into any one of the kshetras, our temples, our namahattas, our kirtan programs, or other sessions, give them a little bit of service, anything insignificant, because that particular service of rendering a very small amount of service would begin the eternal journey, because that hand has been used in the eternal service of the Lord. It would begin an eternal journey. It is such a powerful way to begin someone's journey. Bring them into the atmosphere, give them an opportunity to come in touch with Krishna by rendering a little bit of service. That particular service, that particular movement would begin their journey. There are so many souls over the years whom we have met who have come and joined the movement because they found Lord Jagannath very attractive during Rath Yatra. So they said, I found this very attractive, so I just came and I pulled the rope. So they come and they pull the rope a little bit, and Jagannath just pulls them in. So basically, we have seen so many who have just come into this kind of very powerful process of Krishna consciousness by rendering a little bit of service. Very, very small quantity of service. And this is so important. This is so important. This is so important because they render a little bit of service, they begin their journey. If those hands don't render service, if those tongues don't call upon Krishna's names, if those heads don't bow down, they are dead men and women walking. So it is our duty, in one sense, to give opportunity, to encourage, and to create an atmosphere where they come in touch with the transcendental pastimes of the Lord. And once they come and render even a little bit of service, now they have begun the eternal journey. In other words, their soul now is slowly, steadily going to take over. It's just a matter of time. The eyes which do not look at the symbolic representations of the personality of Godhead, Vishnu, his forms, name, quality, etc., are like those printed on the plumes of the peacock, and the legs which do not move to the holy places where the Lord is remembered are considered to be like tree trunks. Basically, they're describing a circumstance where the body and the mind are so alive that they have completely confounded and overwhelmed the journey of the soul. And because the body is going to be destroyed, it is basically a circumstance, as we called earlier, of a dead man walking. This is what this is. So if we do not become alive within, then we are dead completely. And as a consequence, even when a child is worshiping and playing with dolls, but making believe of the deity worship of the Lord, that child is extraordinarily alive because it's on the eternal path. This is to be recognized. The person who has not at any time received the dust of the feet of the Lord's pure devotee upon his head is certainly a dead body. Why do they emphasize this here? The person who has not at any time received the dust of the feet of the Lord's pure devotee upon his head is certainly a dead body. They emphasize the fact that we haven't received kripa. Why? Because without kripa, without mercy, we have absolutely no ability to move forward in pure devotional service. So as a consequence, when by some rare blessing, agyata sukriti or good fortune that has not been fully recognized and accepted, the soul comes in touch with the dust of the lotus feet of a pure devotee, then immediately the service is being rendered. And as a consequence, the body becomes used in the service of the Lord. The soul becomes alive. In other words, when I use the word soul becoming alive, I'm talking about the soul taking over, the soul's journey beginning. Certainly that heart is steel-framed, which in spite of once chanting the holy name of the Lord with concentration, does not change when ecstasy takes place, tears fill the eyes and the hair stand on end. So here, this is spoken with great realization that basically when we chant Harinam and we don't experience what is being described in scripture, when we do not experience the highest symptoms of bhakti as described in scripture, as experienced by the devotees of Chaitanya Charitamrita, then one should understand that we are committing offenses. The soul is pure. Nam is Krishna. When the two of them come together, why wouldn't there be profound change? What is it which is preventing the experience from happening? Then we talk about offenses. We spoke about it quite a bit in the previous session. The 10th offense of being in touch with material nature and being enthused with material nature, even though we receive so many instructions about what is the danger, that offense occurs because the body and the mind are more alive and there are more opportunities for them to engage in sense gratification than for the soul to execute bhakti. That offense occurs when there are desires in the heart. It means that the senses are in touch with the objects of the senses. When desires are in the heart of wanting to enjoy this world in so many different ways, it means that the senses are very much in touch with the objects of the senses. So that is the reason why it is being said that because we are Kripa Siddhas, because we have somehow or the other by come in touch with the dust of the lotus feet of the devotee and we have come in touch with this movement, if we can't take up Harinam and we're still feeling quite disenchanted, we feel quite overwhelmed, we struggle with our daily routine, we struggle with the sadhana, then we would need to examine our attitude, we need to examine and take inventory of where we could be going wrong. The journey is quite gradual, but a journey being gradual doesn't mean that we are inert and we experience nothing until we reach the point of prema. That is not the case. This journey of Krishna consciousness is like scaling a peak. You scale a peak and you come to a ledge. In that ledge, depending on where we are, we experience gifts of Krishna consciousness. We experience Krishna in certain ways. Then that enthuses us and we continue climbing this particular peak. Even though it's harder, as we go higher, it becomes harder, simply because of the fact that it's a peak. But we are enthused by what we've already experienced. So each and every year, as we go through years and years and years of practice of Krishna consciousness, we should be better off compared to the previous year. We should be able to reflect on where we are this particular year, this particular day, and we should be able to see an increased degree of desire to participate in Krishna consciousness, not the same or decreased aspect. So we should be able to see that, and we should be eager to observe that. I'm not talking about experiencing the highest symptoms of love of Godhead. I'm talking about experiencing a greater desire and a greater will of wanting to come in touch with Krishna. That is scaling for us. We are penetrating layers and layers of covering of material nature. As we penetrate with intensity, we have the ability to come in touch with gifts of Krishna consciousness. We do. All of us go through it. It's documented. That is a reason why our acharyas have written about their experiences. That is a reason why they talk about what they went through, so that we would be able to calibrate ourselves by looking at what they have gone through and saying that, yes, it's written in scripture and I'm going through it, therefore it's bona fide. So if we don't have experiences, profound experiences, and if we do not have enthusiasm, which is most important, is for us to observe if we are enthusiastic and focused on sadhana. If we don't see it happen in a more profound way year after year, we would need to examine ourselves and our whole process more carefully to see where we are going wrong. The Shastra, Bhagavatam, is telling us, if this is happening, it's because there are offenses. This is the 10th step in the offenses to the holy name. If there are challenges in experiencing Nam, it is because the body is more alive than the journey of the soul. Why is the body so alive? Why are the senses so active? It is because offenses are being committed. As a consequence, Kripa is being withdrawn. We are Kripa Siddhas. Our perfection is dependent on mercy. As a consequence, when we offend the givers of bhakti, or when we do not take the givers of bhakti seriously, when we minimize their presence in our lives, then obviously it starts receding. Kripa starts receding. Yes, Lord Nityananda has just spread the mission around the world. He has distributed Naam around the world. He has distributed Prema around the world. But it doesn't mean that everybody is going to receive the same kind of benefits regardless of what they do. He has given us the Kripa. But he is saying, I've thrown a rope to you. You better catch hold of the rope and start climbing. This is why I'm saying it's like scaling a peak. We have to grab the rope that Lord Nityananda has given us and start scaling. We have to start coming out. So every year, our effort has to increase. It can't remain the same. It is absurd when we start thinking that if you function in a secular world, you're working in a corporation, and you somehow go and convince your boss, try convincing your boss saying, whatever I did last year, I'm going to do this year, but I need a promotion at the end of this year. That's not going to work. They're going to expect us to do a lot more. So in that sense, if we do not find an increased level of desire to participate in devotional service, it means there isn't much of a desire to bring the soul fully out in terms of its participation in the eternal journey, which means there's something wrong with what we're doing. And more than likely, scripture is telling us it is because we are committing offenses. It is offenses, and it is also a gradual improvement. So we need to see what it is. Gradual increases in sadhana are what we should be observing. We should observe it. It is gradual. I'm not saying it is overnight. It is gradual. But at the same time, there should be improvement. We should be observing improvement. We should see an increased level of focus. We should see an increased level of interest in the angas of bhakti. We should see a decrease in the participation in aspects of our life which are distinctly disconnected or not connected to Krishna consciousness. There should be some level of indication of what is happening. And we should be brave enough to look into our hearts to find out if this is indeed the case. Because this requires effort, it requires introspection as well. So we don't want to operate in a manner where we shut things out and think that this is basically a journey where we just keep walking and walking and walking. We do the same thing we do previous year, this year, and then we finally think that we're going to reach some place which is wonderful. It doesn't quite work that way. It doesn't work that way. It is like scaling a peak. It is like achieving things. And it requires effort. It requires increased effort on a year-by-year basis. There requires to be some introspection to see if what we have done this year is improvements over previous year. Are we doing the same problems? Are we having the same issues as the previous year? Are we bogged down by the same challenges? Then there's something wrong. We need to pay closer attention to it. This is the final verse. O Sutta Goswami, your words are pleasing to our minds. Please therefore explain this to us as it was spoken by the great devotee Sukadev Goswami, who is very expert in transcendental knowledge, and we spoke to Maharaj Parikshit upon being asked. So basically, the next chapter is the process of creation. But so far in the first 3 chapters, we have seen a delineation of a journey of someone who has woken up, a soul who has woken up. The idea of someone who has just woken up is being described. In the first part, they talk about coming in touch with the universal form of the Lord. This is basically the manifestation of all the separated energies of Krishna within this material creation and the Virat Rupa, where everything is included. But for a neophyte or a novice devotee, someone who is taking the first step into the idea of God realization, self-realization, for them to recognize the universal form and for them to understand how the separated energies of Krishna work is very important, because they then can identify with it and they can move forward. This is not being implied as the path given to devotees. It is basically a system where it could be the first step towards God realization. Yeah. Then the subsequent chapter, we spoke about the yogi, which is the second chapter. The yogi is concentrating on the super soul in the heart. And then there is the process of Ashtanga Yoga, which is being described. The process of Ashtanga Yoga fundamentally deals with the purification of the subtle body. The subtle body, as we know it, is in a highly simplified form, which is being presented to us, has all kinds of very complex nervous systems and psychic centers internally because it is a body. And the yogi basically recognizes the process of purification and is able to focus on the different psychic centers. We call them chakras. They're able to focus on the nadis, the nervous system within the body. They know which mantras to chant, which asanas to perform, and what kind of pranayama to do. And the whole idea is for them to be able to repair the damage done by coming in touch with material nature and slowly, steadily purifying the different psychic centers. And the whole idea is purification so that they could cross over to the different part of the material universe, to leave the material universe, and they could liberate themselves. And then we come into the process of devotional service. Then we spoke about different kinds of desires in the last 3 chapters. We spoke about those who are desiring everything in this world, which is the sarvakami. We spoke about the mokshakami, those who feel that whatever is in this world is of no use and they want to leave the world. And then we spoke about the akama, the devotee who basically does not have desires which are connected to this world. So we spoke about the 3 different categories in the previous session. We also gave the fact that this is foundational for Srila Rupa Goswami's statement of Anya Vilashita Shunyam, Jnana Karmadi Anavratam, Anukulyena Krishna Anuchilanam Bhakti Uttama. We are not interested in Sarvakama. We are not interested in Moksha Kama. Krishna consciousness does not have the objective of purification. We do not want to get misled by the word pure devotee. We do not want to get misled. Yes, we need to be pure from the effects of material nature, but that is a means to an end. It is a means to an end. It is not the goal in itself. The goal in itself is prema, love. Because without love, there would be no surrender. Without manmanabha madbhakto, there is no sarvadharman parityajya. Without sarvadharman parityajya, which is surrender, there cannot be service. Ultimately, we want to engage in Krishna consciousness, being fully aware of who we are in relationship to Krishna. This is Krishna Sambandha. And unless there is full recognition of who we are in Krishna's service, then we can't render service, abhideya. And as a consequence, first there has to be love, because without love, one cannot surrender. One can surrender in fear, but that is not the objective. It is pratikul and anukul. Here, Srila Rupa Goswami is emphasizing anukulyasa. Anukula means favorable. We are not going to be in fear. We're going to fall in love with the Lord. Because we are in love, we're going to give him a complete free hand on what he wants to do with us. That is sarvadharman parityajya. So before sarvadharman parityajya, there has to be love. Without love, there cannot be surrender. And without love and surrender, there cannot be proper service. That is the reason why we're going in step by step, or they're trying to eliminate different aspects which can be obstacles. So in this particular session, we spoke about the fact that recognition of what is wrong and what is right about ourselves has to begin with understanding how alive we are. If we recognize how alive we are is simply a definition of how much the soul's journey is being facilitated in this existence, to that extent we are alive. The extent to which there's involvement in the facilitation of the body, to that extent we are dead men and women walking. So that's being described here in this particular chapter as well. So we conclude 3 chapters. The following session, we begin with the 4th of the 2nd canto. So any questions? So there's one question here on chat. Those of you who want to ask questions, you should unmute yourself. But I'm just going to read the question on chat and I'm going to try and see if I can address it. Can you please explain about why it is important to associate with like-minded devotees? See, like-minded devotees essentially is a definition of those who are serious. Sangha is all about being inspired. Sangha is all about coming in touch with those who have the ability to inspire us. So when we use the word like-minded devotees, we are not talking about those who fit in with a false ego, because we have our own definition of who we are. We may get along with some kind of people, we may not get along with others. So we do not want to devote time, or rather a definition which fits in with the false ego, saying like-minded equals false ego, which means you are like me, I'm like you. No, that's not the definition of Shastra. Like-minded means those who have the ability to inspire us on a path of Krishna consciousness. Inspiration is the definition of Sangha. When someone inspires us, they're being used by Krishna. Krishna is using them. This is a definition. This is a definition which is given by Shastra, that Krishna is using a devotee to inspire us. Then such a devotee who inspires us is like a Siksha Guru. As a consequence, Krishna is using them. Krishna uses the Guru, he uses Nam to attract. So, like minded essentially means that one who has the ability to inspire us. We need to find inspiration. And whoever has the ability to inspire us, we accept them. How do we accept them? We accept them with the definition of pranipatena pariprashnena sevaya, so that we can receive what they have to give us and inspire us. This is one way of looking at it. The other is, we also need to be able to find those devotees whom we can share our heart with. There has to be confidential relationships in Krishna consciousness as well, because we can't really open our hearts with everyone and anyone. This doesn't mean that we are hiding things. It simply means it doesn't help in sharing confidential aspects of our existence with everybody in the open. It doesn't help all the time. So it sometimes causes problems. As a consequence, we need a devotee who is able to inspire us, whom we trust and can confidentially reveal our heart to, who would then be able to inspire us by unraveling and helping us with our difficulties. So that is the other part to it. Is there any other comment or question?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
Prabhuji, I was wondering, this is a question I've thought about and contemplated a long time, but never really quite have understood it. When a person first starts in our consciousness, we are new to the temple. There are hardly any, sevas or any duties that we do. We just go there as an outsider, just enjoy the prasad, look at the, have darshan of the deities. People generally, if you're out new, everyone is very nice and welcoming to you. As the years go by, one starts to take some services, whichever one is able to do. When you're interacting with devotees, sometimes the things go wrong. People sometimes may appreciate what you're doing, but there are likely to be, what you say, friction in many ways other than, more than one way. So that would that mean, and then we are, because if people are not happy or I am not happy with what they are doing, yeah, then we are likely to discuss that. So does that mean, that if you don't do any service, then you can keep away from the offenses of not interacting. But if you do accept service, then that friction is likely to come up. So what is a good way of actually avoiding those offenses against, as you rightly said, that if the taste for chanting is not coming and if we not progress in our lives, so we are definitely doing something. So the years are going by, but the progress we want to see in our lives is not happening. So could you comment upon what is a good way of doing the service but keeping, ourselves safe from falling down?
Good question. So the point is very simple. I spoke earlier in the class today about being prayerful when you approach Krishna. Service, when we spoke about service, we are talking about service to the Lord. So being prayerful is also an adjustment that we need to make before we even step out of the house. Before we go and interact with devotees in the temple, be prayerful and ask for help from the Lord, that we would have an opportunity to serve. Because when we ask the Lord for an opportunity to serve and we become very prayerful and we reflect internally on the opportunity that is being given to us, then automatically then we have the opportunity to come in touch with service, and we also have the ability to learn. The idea which we are trying to present here is also connected to an earlier point that I made. When we are in the assembly of devotees, we have to remember that Krishna is there. He is there. He is interconnecting all of us. Krishna is the center point. So when we are trying to interact with devotees before service, be reflective. Please be very reflective before you step out of the house. Krishna is not dependent on us. He is not. Service is an opportunity for us to purify our senses. If we live in the West, it is an absolute necessity to engage in service. Because in the West, we are not in touch with spiritual phenomena that easily. Material nature is quite strong. It can overwhelm us. As a consequence, service is very important when we specifically live in the West. So when we go out for service and the temple is calling us for service, when we have an opportunity for service, reflect on the fact that you want to serve, reflect on the fact that Krishna is giving you an opportunity, reflect on the fact that this is a once in a lifetime opportunity because we do not know if we have the same kind of opportunity in the subsequent lifetime. And then step out with gratitude and then take all the atmosphere which is there as a part of whatever Krishna has given to you for you to learn. The whole verse of Trinadapi Sunichena, Tarori Vasaishnana means the first step is we need to accept the reality of the circumstance as if Krishna has arranged it for us. It may not be that Krishna has arranged the karma of one devotee or the other. It is the karma of devotees. But internally, when we go into the temple environment, when we interact with service, the first reflection is, whatever I'm experiencing today, Krishna has personally arranged for my benefit. So the first thing is acceptance. So accepting the environment as an arrangement of Krishna is the first step. The next step is to Taroriva Sahishnuna, where we tolerate the circumstances that are being presented to us. When these two things happen and we focus on the service by accepting the environment, tolerating the difficulties that we focus on, but yet we act with courage on the service, then we would see some real progress. We'll see some real progress. Before we go out for service, let us just remember that there's nothing we're going to gain from this other than wanting to please Krishna. So when that becomes the focus, then everything is acceptable. We accept it because we have no stakes. This is the reason why pure devotees or advanced devotees, they do not have a problem with being humble. Lord Chaitanya displayed it himself. Why is it that advanced devotees do not have a problem with being humble? They do not have a problem with being humble is because they have absolutely nothing to gain in this world. So there is one more reflection before beginning our service. We want to gain nothing from this. Our interest is zero in gaining anything. We want to give the very maximum to Krishna. The Krishna has arranged this service for us. This is our path to serving him better, our path to purifying our senses so that we could become better servants. Then everything really unravels. And the challenges that come, we should tolerate it. And then we accept the circumstances, Krishna's arrangement. We tolerate the circumstances that come through, and then we become absolutely fixed in chanting. It becomes very easy for such a person to chant. So I hope this long-winded answer was useful.
Thank you ever so much, Prabhuji. This has been, sticking in my mind for so long, but never really got an answer. Thank you ever so much. Thank you so much. Hari Bol.
Hari Bol. Any other question or comment? Haribol, is anybody speaking, or is it maybe some static that's coming through? Is there any question or comment?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Haribol?
Pranam. Prabhuji, I was just wondering, is that it's not for all of us, or probably for, at least for me, that while chanting, we don't feel a lot of ecstasy that is mentioned. So how we should take that in, basically, because it's not the situation which is mentioned. So does it still mean that heart is steel framed, and it's not actually, it's very strong words being said for this, basically, that one doesn't feel ecstasy when chanting. So how should we take that up? What should be our mood while to consume, to imbibe the instruction, and what should we do for that? That's what I wanted to understand.
Sure. Now, very important for us to understand, for all of us to understand, is that the gift of Krishna consciousness and the availability of mercy in terms of us being able to experience higher and higher levels of Krishna consciousness is a matter of two aspects. One is effort and the other is mercy. So what we should do is not judge ourselves based on whether we are experiencing ecstasies, whether we are experiencing certain visions of what the previous acharyas saw. Are we seeing Krishna? We do not want to judge ourselves and our effort based on these phenomena. What we want to do is we want to write down the angas of bhakti. The five main angas are sadhu sanga, harinam, the chanting of harinam and the both smaranam and nama kirtanam, Srimad Bhagavatam, the service of the deities, and Dham Seva. We want to write down the five main angas given by our acharyas, and we want to examine our enthusiasm and our efforts being increased and our overall interest in these increased year by year, day by day, week by week, and month by month. That is what we need to focus on. The point I'm trying to make is the gift of Krishna consciousness, of really coming in touch with profound spiritual phenomena, is a gift. What we want to focus on is the effort part. And the way we want to focus on the effort part and judge our progress is to see if the effort is improving and increasing year by year. You see? Because there really isn't, I would say, a farther limit for Krishna consciousness. There isn't. The advanced devotees who are experiencing ecstasies, they're not going to sit back with their feet up on the, feet up and then say that, okay, I'm experiencing advanced ecstasies and this is what it is. They are also going to be quite despondent and eager to experience even more. They're going to feel quite underwhelmed. They're going to say that, I'm trying so much and I'm doing so much. Krishna, where are you? So this is also a desperation that is seen in the writings of our acharyas. Very, very advanced acharyas with very advanced phenomena, advanced experiences, writing as if nothing is happening. Why is this so? Because the eagerness to experience Krishna consciousness, it keeps increasing because Krishna himself is limitless. Krishna consciousness is limitless. There really isn't an outer boundary of what we could call as I have achieved everything. So what we need to focus on, the answer is focus on chanting. Where are we today? Are we in Anartha Nivritti or are we in Nishta? Are we in Ruchi? Are we in Ashakti? Calibrate yourself, because you would have enough material which has been given for us to understand where we are. If we are in the lower rungs of Krishna consciousness, then we have no business talking about the higher rungs. We start focusing on getting out of the lower levels. That should be our first attempt. So my point to you is, it's easier and it is safer to focus on the angas of bhakti and whether we are able to execute the angas of bhakti efficiently and are we making improvements. It's easier because it's observable, it can be calibrated, can be seen, it can be experienced. The subtle phenomena of being able to see Krishna, experience Krishna, taste, different kinds of Krishna consciousness, taste the name. This is a gift. It will come along. That is the reason why Krishna consciousness is scientific. It has been documented. It's been well documented. It's been written. It has been shared. It's a matter of time. But we don't want to calibrate progress based on that. We want to calibrate progress based on whether the angas of bhakti are being done by us to the maximum degree. We hear Raghunath Das Goswami in Sri Radhakund. Till his last days, he used to be paying 2,000 obeisances, X number of, I would say, many, many number of rounds, deity worship, dandavats, etc. Why would such an accomplished devotee continue on the external aspects of bhakti, which is sadhana? It is because it is easily calibrated. We will never know if we are walking on the right path if we take our eyes from the angas of bhakti. For us to know if we are on the right path, focus on the angas of bhakti. Because occasionally we may receive a gift. Someone might see a blue boy. Someone might see a golden colored girl. Yeah, it can happen. But if they start thinking that's the end of the road and they give up chanting, they give up seva, they give up association, then they're in deep trouble. So what is better is for us to focus on the experiences of our acharyas. Till the very end, they used to do seva. Till the very end, they used to engage in chanting. Till the very end, they used to engage in paying dandavats to everybody who came, regardless of their progress in Krishna consciousness. So this is what they did. So we want to follow in their footsteps. Then once we follow in their footsteps, everything else will also automatically follow. So that's external behavior. That is why I'm requesting that We want to focus on external behavior. We want to focus on what we do on a daily basis rather than what is going to be given to us. What is going to be given to us is certain. It's a gift. It will be given to us because we have come this far. We are connected to the most amazing, spiritual system ever. It will come to us. We would be able to experience what is to be given. It's documented. All we need to do now is to ensure that we are giving our very best out, because that's easier to calibrate, easier to measure. We will know exactly what to do. Yeah. So I hope this is clear to you. Yeah. There's a beautiful question. It is a question, and I agree with you that they're quite harsh. They're harsh because they're basically saying that so much has been given and so little is being experienced. So they're quite harsh with their expression. It's coming out of compassion.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Yeah, I mean, that's really inspiring. That what the focus should be there, and the judge for us basically at such a stage, we shouldn't be judging ourselves based on the ecstasy we experience, rather than how we are able to execute the angas of bhakti. That's probably is more important for us.
Yeah, because that's where we need to. Yeah, we need to show our steadiness in that. How enthused would Srila Prabhupada have been in terms of leaving Vrindavan and coming to Boston? How enthused would he have been? Not much. But that's where he tolerated his circumstances and he did what he was supposed to do to please his guru. That is what he did. He did what he had to do as a matter of service by tolerating his circumstances, accepting the reality of what the Western world was. For a sadhu as accomplished as Srila Prabhupada to leave Radha Damodar Mandir and then come from Seva Kunj all the way to America, to Boston, it is a hellish experience. But he did that. He tolerated the hellish experience. He tolerated the separation from the Dham. He tolerated the separation from Radharani's Seva Kunj. He tolerated all of that. And they accepted the environment. And he constantly was grateful for the opportunity to serve his Guru Maharaj. So which is our position as well. So we would want to understand that it is not going to be pleasant all the time. So we should never go by what feels good in Krishna consciousness. We want to go by what is right. And we also want to go by whether we are happy to do what is right in a greater and greater way as each year progresses.
Thank you, Prabhuji. That was really inspiring and right thing did you actually imbibe and take it forward, basically.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other question? Let me see. There's someone on chat, so I'm just going to read the question. If anybody has a question, you could think about it once I'm done with this. Please, can you let me know how should one deal with the situation where you're trying to provide a Krishna conscious atmosphere at home for the child, yet the outside world has such a detrimental effect on them? When we see that it hurts us, so how can we deal with this? This is a challenge, but what we have to do is increase the experience of Krishna consciousness. Increasing the experience of Krishna consciousness at home would automatically protect their senses from being attracted to the impulses from outside. But we also want to remember when we are raising a child that Srila Prabhupada had problems with his children. This is Srila Prabhupada. Srila Advaita Acharya had problems with one of his sons. He became an impersonalist. So we would want to remember that we as parents have the duty to provide the environment. We have the duty to give the experiences to the extent to which we can. But beyond that, we may not be able to control the circumstances. There is still the whole notion of free will. So I just want to be clear that we don't want to get too caught up in thinking that we can handle everything. We do want to do our very best, and we want to be able to give the best of opportunities. But it still depends on the soul to pick it up and move forward. There would definitely be a positive effect regardless. Any other question or comment? Okay. So if anybody wants to write anything, they could write to me on WhatsApp, and we could take it from there. And so we'll meet again the following week, same time, and we will be doing chapter 4 of the second canto. I request you to read through it so that you would have questions and you would be able to participate more fully. So it's chapter 4 of the second canto, the following session next week. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna.